Next, could I introduce Michael Sass? Michael is the Accountant General, National Treasury of South Africa. So do we call you General? Not. Generaal. Michael. Okay, someone with a title. We have someone with a title here. Michael's got various different qualifications. I think a lot of you must have encountered Michael on conferences, articles that he's written, and so on. In terms of his qualifications, he's got a master's degree in commerce, MCom. He's a CA. He's also a certified internal auditor. He has got public and private sector experience. I see the list of senior positions that Michael's held: Morvest, Business Innovations Group, Grant Thornton, and then public sector, Gauteng Provincial Government, Sass. So quite a few. Serves as National Treasury representative on some of the boards. For example, he's representing Treasury on the URBA board, on the Accounting Standards Board. And he's also the chairperson of, I'm going to have to read this off, the Eastern and Southern African Association of Accountants General. It's an honor for a South African, that we have a South African representing us on a body such as that. Yeah, I think you've encountered Michael a couple of times. Michael, I'm seeing a photo here. I don't think it's you. It's your next slide. They'll see the photo now. It looks a bit like you. People can judge for themselves. It's not you. Okay, with that, over to Michael. Michael, we're looking forward to listening to you.
Thank you, Program Director. Ladies and gentlemen, let me start by saying all protocols observed. That's the best thing we ever developed in government. When you don't know who all the audience members are, you just say all protocols observed and you're covered. Might I just add, Nicholas, that all the stats that you've given, apart from that, you also have 100%. All the presenters you have today are 100% best looking and most handsome presenters. I'm sure you will agree. Colleagues, can I just, before I start, tender my apology. Unfortunately, I have my own conference, as you heard. I'm chairman of ESAC. We have a conference at the moment going on in Durban, so I have to attend my own conference. I'm going to run after this, which is a real pity, because I'm going to give you some of the economic stats at the moment, and I would have loved to hear Mr. Sushler's comments on that and how he feels about that, and certainly hear what he says. But unfortunately, I have to leave after this. My colleague, Jonas Shai, is going to stay here today. He will be part of the discussion that happens. So if you have more questions, you can ask him. Also, we work very closely with Bernard Ugalas from the URBA on the ROSC implementation. So I'm sure he'll give you some pointers as well if you have questions. That is not a picture of myself, as you have heard. But what we're trying to demonstrate to you, I think you'll all agree that once we get it right, once we get the books to balance, we're all pretty satisfied. And that's what we're trying to do in government as well. We're trying to balance the book, but we're trying to play an oversight role as well now. My talk today is mostly about the ROSC, the report on standards and codes that has been issued by the World Bank, and what we're doing about it, and how it's going to influence you. But it's important to know up front that as a government, we are trying to do away with red tape. I'm sure you're going to ask me when we go through it, you're going to say, well, this is just more red tape and stuff. But there's a balance that you have to strike, because you have to protect the consumer as well, the people that make use of your service. And as you just heard, there's a number of people that use designations who are not really suitably qualified to perform those works. And we have to protect the public against that. And because of that, we have to regulate the industry to a greater or lesser extent. So let me start by giving you some economic facts. This comes from a speech that our Honourable Minister has made a couple of weeks ago. The eradication of the triple challenge of poverty, unemployment and inequality remains key for the country, as alluded to in the National Development Plan. Some stats for you. Unemployment, according to Stats SA in August, stood at 25.5% in the country. CPI was recorded in August at 6.4%, which is outside the target of the 3.6% that we have set. We have also recorded weaker GDP numbers, and our interest rate outlook points to the beginning of a hiking season. Take note. Those of you planning on buying new houses, make sure that you have enough money. These key numbers do not paint a good picture, and it's on this note that the principle of confidence in our market becomes even more important. It's very important that even if you have a spaza shop on the corner, that people must have confidence in your ability. If people buy a house in an area because there's shops in that area, and 2 months after they buy their house, the shops go bankrupt, they're going to say, we have no confidence in the people that's supposed to provide us with assurance about these areas. In building confidence in our market, government has also embarked on efforts for policy alignment and policy certainty. The current fiscal program seeks to stabilize the growth of debt and restores fiscal sustainability. To the end of stabilization of the growth of the myriad of other interventions, we have implemented certain cost containment measures. Now, those of you that deal with government will know about these cost containment measures that we have done, but we are going to do even more. Be sure to listen to the medium-term budget when it gets announced on the 22nd of October. But one of the initiatives that we have is the implementation of the report on standards and codes that was done by the World Bank. So let me tell you a little bit about this. I'm sure you all know what it is. But just to give you a little bit of background, in a short synopsis, the first ROSC report was commissioned in 2003 by the former Honourable Minister Pravin Gordhan. It focused on assessing the institutional framework and underpinning the accounting and audit practices. And let me just say that there's various ROSC reports. We have one for the insurance industry, we have one for the banking industry, we have one, I can't remember the other one, but there's various ones that has been done. All of them done independently by the World Bank. It's not government propaganda, it's completely independent. And the reason for that is to assess where we stand as a country in terms of our regulation of those various industries. And also to see whether we're following best practice or whether we can improve on the services that we provide. Main purpose of ROSC was to determine reforms to improve the quality of financial reporting in South Africa, to agree on implementation of the recommendations to strengthen the accounting and auditing practice, to further advance governance and financial accountability, and to apply these reforms to improve the business environment and thereby the competitiveness of the country as an investment destination, which is our ultimate goal. We're trying to make sure that our country is an investment destination of note. So the ROSC report that was done by the World Bank identified certain strengths already that is in South Africa. And this is mainly because of people like yourself. And this leads to exactly what we are trying to achieve and how we're going to achieve it. So the strengths identified was that reforms undertaken in the past decade have strengthened corporate financial reporting systems, and you'll hear later on that in certain areas we rated number 1 in the world. The professional accounting organizations continuing to contribute in the development of more technical and professional accountants to serve the public and private sector. The academy is one of those areas. And gender and racial representation of professional accountants improving due to initiatives being implemented by government, PAOs, tertiary institutions, and audit regulators. And we heard the figures earlier from Cyber, from Nicholas, where he said 51% of members classified themselves as black members, and 49% as white members. So some more strengths that has been regulated. Our independent regulated board for auditors, IRBA, contributing to the strength of the auditing practice, especially through supporting auditors to apply stipulated international auditing and ethics standards. This is important. IRBA is rated number 1 in the world. We'll look at it a little bit later, as in terms of a regulatory body for the constituents that it serves. So it's a model that we want to build on when we expand this service to the rest of the accounting industry. Then South Africa having a long history of standard setting and playing an influential role in standard setting. And again, if I can quote from what Nicholas has said, we should not just adopt standards just because international people have told us to do it. We should really be questioning those standards and saying, is it applicable to us? And we have a long history of doing that. So we should continue doing that going into the future as well. And then the financial reporting investigation panel, formerly the GARP monitoring panel, is what we used to call it in the old days. They're contributing to improving the quality of financial reporting by listed companies. So let us just quickly look at what we have to be proud of, as I said. First of all, the last ROSC report was done in 2003. All the recommendations have been implemented, and we've been complimented on that by the World Bank, because it does show our intention that we are serious about accounting reform and accounting regulation. Then, according to the recently released World Economic Forum Global Competitive Index, South Africa is ranked first in the following areas: strength of the auditing and reporting standards, that's IRBA, and Mr. Bernard Hogallis will be here this afternoon, he'll tell you about it. Efficacy of corporate boards, I think a lot of that might have to do with the King report that has been issued and that we're all trying to follow. Regulation of securities exchanges, it's mostly the JSE, and the legal rights index as well. So it's evident that efforts by different stakeholders are paying off. The country's status as number one in those areas should also be viewed with efforts of financial reforms that the government and the country has undertaken. Because it's not easy to attain a designation of being number one in the world. It takes quite a bit of work to get to that status. So let's get to what we want to discuss today. I'm going to spend a little bit of time on that first one. These are the recommendations that the World Bank has made in terms of the ROSC report. First of all, establish a super regulator to regulate PAOs. We believe very strongly that all organizations in the accounting and auditing sphere should be regulated. We believe strongly that consumers are entitled to protection just like they are in any other industry. And therefore, there must be some regulation. We are, however, mindful of over-regulation, more red tape, etc. What we are proposing is a super regulator, somebody that will oversee and make sure that all the other institutions are following their own rules. First of all, we are saying, if you want to practice as an accountant, you have to belong to a professional institute. Not you may, you have to. So if you want to practice as an accountant in private practice, you have to belong to a professional institute. Why is that? Well, all professional institutes have certain rules and codes. They have a code of ethics. They have continuous professional development. They have an oversight body. They have disciplinary committees that can make sure that you do the work in accordance with the standards. And that is what we need. Consumers need to be certain that those standards have been applied, that you have followed them, that the financial statements that you have drawn up have been done in accordance with those rules. And we believe, as has been pointed out, that the best people to do that is the institute that you belong to. We're not going to tell you which institute you must belong to. You can decide for yourself. You see, you evaluate all of them, you see which one addresses your needs the best, and then you choose that one. But you're going to have to belong to an institute. The super regulator then in turn will regulate the institutes. The super regulator will see and check whether your institute have a code of ethics, do quality reviews, have disciplinary procedures, and all of those things. And by doing that, we believe that the industry, to a large degree, will be self-regulating because it's your own institute that will be regulating you. We are going to establish an independent board to govern the super regulator. So it's not just, it will be representatives from each institution. But more than that, what we are saying is that when you regulate something, you don't necessarily need to be an accountant or an auditor. When you regulate something, you need to have experience in regulating. So it might be a judge, it might be somebody from the insurance industry, it might be somebody that used to be an ombudsman, those kind of people we're going to have on the board to manage the super regulator. Because it's not about necessarily the expert skills. You can always source somebody that's got the expert skills to tell you what happened. But it's understanding how a regulator should operate. Part of what the ROSC has recommended is to review IRBA's resource and its funding model. Now, why is that important to you? IRBA, as we said, is rated #1 in the world. And so the World Bank recommended that we strengthen them even further so that they maintain that position. Now, we're going to take a slightly different stance because we don't know who the super regulator is going to be one day. But it would be foolish to pump a lot of money into IRBA if IRBA is not going to be that super regulator. But it might well be somebody like IRBA, some kind of organization similar in nature to IRBA that will become the super regulator. Then ROSC also recommended that financial statements of a large public interest company be reviewed for compliance with financial reporting standards and PAOs to increase collaboration with tertiary institutions to promote the profession. The last one is very important. There's certain areas that we think that our tertiary institutions are not focusing enough on. We think that courses at the moment are too one size fits all, if I can put it that way. There are a lot of people that when they start out, they are not certain how their life is going to develop, but there are a lot of people as well that knows for certain. When they go to the university to study, they know they never want to be an audit partner. They know they want to practice from their own home. Likewise, there's others that say, I want to be a chartered accountant, or I want to be a chartered management accountant, I want to be an auditor, and they study in that direction. But at the moment, universities is a sort of a one size fits all. Remember when you did accounting for everybody. It was the same for everybody. The standards that applied probably was the IFRA standards. And that doesn't necessarily apply to a small business. Now we're saying there must be greater diversification. And that's part of what we're going to focus on. We are working closely with some tertiary institutions. We're already piloting some projects to try and expand that. So in future, you can choose to take financial accounting as a subject to become a chartered accountant, for example, but you can also choose to do something similar to become a small practitioner kind of situation. So we are working on these things, but it might take a little while before they're fully implemented. Some more recommendations. PAOs and tertiary institutions should include public sector content in their education and training curricula. I'm not sure how many of you do work for government, but it's going to become very important that you understand at least certain basic rules of government. Things like the PFMA and the MFMA, etc. Must have a basic understanding of how we work. Understand that in government, I mean the simplest term, we're not looking for profit, so it's no use drawing up a profit and loss account, income statement, stuff like that, because we are concerned with service delivery. Therefore, our outlook in terms of spending money is different to yours. Capacitate the Financial Reporting Standards Council sufficiently to meet its mandate. All PAOs to strengthen their capacity to serve their members. A key requirement, that one, if you want to be a professional body in this industry, you have to show and demonstrate that you have the capability, that you have the right leadership, and that you can apply these things. And then create legislation to allow audit firms to organize as limited liability partnerships. I'm not sure how many of you that will influence. It's mostly the last, the large audit firms, KPMG, Deloitte, PwC, those kind of firms. We are looking at creating limited liability partnerships. It's still open for debate. You know, some of us believe that if you want to be in a profession, you've got to stand by what you do. If you certify that something is correct to a certain degree, you've got to take some responsibility for that. But we are looking into that recommendation. And then some more. What might be of interest to you is that small and medium-sized practices face challenges in keeping up to date with the development in both accounting and auditing standards. I'm sure you know that. I'm sure it's difficult if you're a one-man or a two-man practice for you to leave your work and go on training because you've got work to do. And many of the SMPs are in breadwinner situations. You make a living. You don't necessarily become the richest accountant ever and retire when you're 25. A lot of us need to continue working all the time. And therefore it becomes difficult to keep up to date with new developments, etc. The SMPs that want to be competitive in the marketplace need to raise their professional capabilities through expansion. It is worth noting that if an accounting firm is not a viable size, it is difficult for that firm to continuously support enhancing professional capabilities. Now, what we are advocating is not that you must all merge and become one big firm, not at all. But you've got to have some kind of working relationship with colleagues of yourself. And that, by the way, is exactly why tonight is very important, the cocktail function, so that you network with your colleagues. I hope you don't just come here, listen, and then leave. I hope that you will network. Because why it is important is so that when there's new legislation, new standards that come out, that you can share ideas, that you can consult with one another, that you can look at those changes together and see what impact it will have on your practice. And therefore you have to find an alliance that you can work with, people that you can closely associate with, and people that can assist you when you need to develop these new standards, but also when you need training. It's very expensive for an individual to get that training. And often we find some fly-by-night courses that is being presented. We see that often. People that doesn't belong to a professional institute, they even use our name in vain. So we're presenting something on the PFMA as endorsed by National Treasury, which is not true. We don't endorse anybody. If you ever see that, please take note. So where are we currently? The Minister of Finance has accepted all the ROSC recommendations. We are going to implement all of them. It's just to which extent that is debatable, to a greater or to a lesser extent. Currently we are doing consultations with various PAOs, and this will continue for a while. The kind of changes that we envisage is not something that will be done overnight. It will probably take in the region of 7 to 10 years to fully implement all of them, although we are looking at changing the legislation within the next 2 years. But it will take a long time. Work has started on these legislative changes. As you know, we have certain commitment dates that must be adhered to in terms of any act. You know the process, the green paper, the white paper, and going through Parliament and all of that takes quite a while. So we have started with that process. Intergovernmental engagement to coordinate reforms are ongoing. An operating and regulatory model based on the UK example is being explored. My colleague Jonas, if you have time during tea break, you can speak to him about the model that we are trying to implement. There is an organization in the UK that acts as a super regulator in the UK environment. We are trying to replicate that. See first whether it will be applicable to South Africa and whether it can serve here as well. We say reforms are expected to be fully implemented within the next 2 to 3 years. What we mean with that is that the legislation will be passed. We know that it will take quite a while, because if you implement a super regulator, we must make sure that your institute that you belong to have the right skills, that they have the means to evaluate you, that they do peer reviews, that there is disciplinary processes in place, etc. And that will continue for quite a while. So you might be thinking to yourself, well, what is the benefits of all of this? Is it not just going to make my life even more difficult? As I said at the start, we're very mindful of the fact that more red tape might be added. That's the last thing that we want to do. But it is very important that the citizens of the country is protected as well. And that applies to everything. That applies to accounting and auditing as well. They must have some basic rights, and they must feel comfortable when they use your services. They must feel that they are getting value for money. And that is what we're trying to regulate. So the benefits will be a better regulated accounting and auditing profession. We believe that by implementing the ROSC recommendations, there will be increased confidence in the accounting and auditing profession as a result of better regulation. And that in turn will lead to increased confidence in the business environment. And eventually it will lead to rating agencies giving us a higher rating, etc. We hope. So colleagues, as I said, we're heading into a difficult economic time. That's what I wanted to tell you about the ROSC. I'm sure I have some time left because it was quite quick. So if you have questions, we can look at that quickly.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. That was very interesting, informative. Are there questions? There's one over there.
Just a question. In our profession, we're getting massive amounts of regulation, and you did mention earlier the protection of the consumer or the public. But I see a divergence or a negligence on the fact that the accountant isn't being protected at all. All this regulation, is designed to protect the users of the information. But when there's a problem where the regulation is negatively affecting the accountant, there is no right to recourse. Is there any addressing of that problem? I'm not just talking about the accountancy as such. We have this monster called Sass, which are doing whatever they want with no recourse. They need to be regulated, and ombudsman's been brought in, and let's face it, it doesn't do anything. The costs are prohibitive to take people to court. So I think everybody sitting in the room here would like to know what's in it for us, because there are a lot of people who are actually thinking about leaving this profession because of all the regulation.
I do think that there is some protection built into the ROSC, but it might be aimed at the wrong people. Because, for example, you would have seen that we would allow audit firms to become limited liability organizations and those kind of things. So it limits your own exposure to certain things. Where I do agree with you is that there must be stronger regulation for the SMEs or SMPs. We have to find a way. The way that we envisage that this will be dealt with is through your institute. The unfortunate thing is, at the moment, you mentioned Sass. I won't mention Sass because they're colleagues of mine. You know, we work closely together. But if there's certain institutions that is very strong in terms of numbers and in terms of legislation, then it's very difficult as an individual to stand up to those organizations. Now, therefore, we have encouraged that you form working groups with other practitioners. But much more important, we envisage, in terms of the ROSC recommendations, we envisage that the role of your protector will be played by your institute, whichever one you choose. You know, we're not going to say join this one or that one or whichever one. But the institute will be the guarding dog that will stand up for you and for your rights and say, this is not right. We're going to fight collectively. Because you can, if we just take cyber as an example, you heard the number of members they have. If you go as an individual against an organization like Sass, for example, it's just one voice. And it's going to be very difficult for you to convince Sass. But if you go with a number of people, and let's just say all the people here today stand together in one voice. I think you said 120 delegates expected. Cyber has got how many members? 2,500. Now that's a significant number in terms of practitioners, you know. Then you can make a difference. You have to understand that, and you might not like this answer, but as a government, our role is to protect the citizen first. That we have to. Doesn't mean that we don't look after you, because without the accounting profession, and you say a lot of people are considering leaving it, it will be a catastrophe for us. We are trying to strive to get better representation, people to get to a higher standard. But I don't think you should be afraid about that. I think, let's see how it develops, but you'll see that your institutions is going to become much stronger than what they are presently. They will have a much greater voice. So as long as you have confidence in the institute that you belong to, then I think your concerns would be taken care of.
There's one over here. Thanks, Michael. That's, I think, a good answer. I don't think you can answer everything, but probably something for you to think of.
Okay, good morning. Thank you, Chairperson. Just 2 comments. Number one is, how open is the door for professions, professional bodies to make inputs to some of the challenges that they're facing from the government side? To what extent can they be heard to make changes? Secondly, you made mention, I'm from the University of Fort Hare. You made mention of the role of universities in these new recommendations. And I just wanted you to maybe to say more about that. But more importantly, the sitters, the sitters that deal with the profession, where do you place them in the whole transformation?
Michael?
Yeah, thanks, Program Director. First of all, the door is always open. Even when the door is closed, it's still open. You know, I had the unfortunate incident with our previous minister. Unfortunately, I didn't do something as quickly as he would like. You know, unfortunately, with that minister, it's always the next day he wants it. And he called me into his office. He said, Michael, where is this thing? I said, but Minister, I've sent it to you 2 weeks ago. So his answer to me is, well, if you knew it was with me and I haven't done anything, why did you not come to me and kick down my door? So even if the door is closed, there's a way of opening it. It's never closed forever. The important thing, first of all, as far as the ROS is concerned that I was talking now, we've only just started. We are consulting with all the professional institutes and bodies, and we will continue to do that. We haven't got very far. You know, there's a number of them that we have to consult in a lot more detail to make sure that we get the right input from them. And that's to make sure that all of your concerns are taken care of. So if you do have concerns about any of the things I presented, please use your institute so that you can speak as one mouth or from one mouth. But even after that process is completed, we will always be open. You know, legislation is changed not because there's a government official that started and has got nothing to do, so he thinks of something new. No, it's changed because the constituents, the citizens, have come up with new requirements, and therefore we need to be in touch with what they do. As far as the expansion into the universities is concerned, again, unfortunately, we've only just begun. We have a unit in National Treasury called Capacity Building that deals with issues of curriculum, etc. But more importantly, my colleague Jonas that's sitting there, he has been in discussions with the Council on Higher Education. They are busy looking at curriculum. Now again, it takes a long time. Remember, you know, it's not like we can make a recommendation the next year it's going to be in your curriculum. You'll know that better than anybody. You know, if we might be lucky to have something in the curriculum in 2016, because you've got to develop the whole curriculum, etc. It's a very long process, but at least we have started that process. So we are on the journey, and we are going to get there eventually.
Thank you, Michael. We've got about 15 minutes to make up. So if you don't mind, if you can leave your questions. Michael, do you have to go now? Yeah, okay, you're running. You don't want any more questions. No. Okay. So if you don't mind, I'm going to excuse Michael, and I'm going to introduce our next speaker. I just want to, just on Michael's, Mike, your presentation has gone off the screen. Maybe you can come forward, Mike. Mike and Michael. Okay. I think something that we shouldn't take lightly from Michael's presentation, we are concerned about the overregulation and the red tape and so on. But Michael started on his second slide, I think about the second slide, about the fact that we are ranked first in the world as far as our standards are concerned, the strength of our boards. And I don't think we understand how significant that is. And I think it's the fourth year in a row that has happened. So I think it's like winning the World Cup 5 years in a row. It really is amazing, and it's probably more important than the World Cup. So congratulations, Mike, to you guys, to the URBA people that are here, and also to all of you that are here today. Again, you might think, what is the importance of that to me in my small business? It is extremely important because this gives everyone out there confidence in not only your practice and your profession, but also in your clients. So your clients are looking for work, and they might not be looking for work overseas, but they are working with people who are looking for work overseas maybe. And it is important that we have that reputation, and it certainly means a lot. So thanks to people like Mike and all of you that are keeping the standards up, and I think it makes a very big difference to our profession, and we don't necessarily recognize it every day. I think that's a great achievement. Thank you, Michael. Thank you for your time and for joining us.